and transparency. If these conditions are not met, the unfortunate thing is that funds will not flow. Madam Speaker, the budget provides for carry-through costs, as I've indicated, of the 2022-23 wage increase. In addition, the budget includes pay progression, a housing allowance, and other benefits for civil servants. The budget also provides additional funding for safety and security, education and health. In health, the funds are to hire new staff, address the shortfall in the compensation budget, and retain additional health workers appointed during the pandemic, as well as to clear the backlog in health services. As for the wage negotiations that just commenced, the budget does not preempt the outcomes. It is an agreement between ourselves and the unions in the summit in March last year that they say if we put up a number before the negotiations, we're preempting the negotiation process. Our ideal view was that we should have concluded the last year's negotiations by June, so that July last year we've commenced with 2023. Unfortunately, things did not work that way. So, nevertheless, these future wage negotiations must strike a balance between fair pay, fiscal sustainability, and the need for additional staff in the frontline services. An unbudgeted wage settlement will require very significant trade-offs in government spending because the wage bill consumes a significant portion of the budget. It will mean that funds must be clawed back in other ways. Mainly, this will mean restricting the ability of department entities to fill non-critical posts. It will also mean achieving cost savings from major rationalization of state entities and programs. As indicated by the President in the SONA, the National Treasury and the President, National Treasury has already identified where large savings can be achieved. In this regard, during the upcoming financial year, the National Treasury will work with the Presidency on concrete proposals to achieve savings by rationalization or closing public entities. Recommendations will be made to the President and Cabinet and should form part of the next budget. In relation to the recent floods and the national disaster declared in various provinces, let me just pause. Let me do that off-ramping because it's quite important here to explain, because there's a failure to understand and therefore a failure to respond. There are two components to a disaster. The first one is called an emergency relief. What are the emergency relief? Some people who need some food here, we need shelter there, we need medical attention there. That thing needs immediate response. Last year, we had 1 billion rand in 4 grants. That 1 billion was depleted, but during the adjustment estimate, we replenished that emergency grant, and we now have 695 million in that emergency grant. What that means, the people who are sitting in halls and other things must access this money so that they must get temporary accommodation, must get food, must get into. That's the first part. The second part of the that you need skilled people than myself, more skilled than myself, who can go into a bridge and assess the cost to build that bridge. And then you submit a proper budget. And that is affected into the normal budget process. That's what we would appeal to the current provinces which are facing disaster. The money is available for immediate emergency relief. We must work together to make sure that communities are attended with speed. So A further 1 billion will be available next year for emergency relief. The emergency relief, as I've indicated, the emergency response also requires provinces and municipalities to reprioritize existing allocations to cater for immediate needs affecting communities, such as temporary shelter. I've done that, I've made reference. The contingency reserve will also be used to fund emergency responses, including as undertaken by the Defence Force. As it pertains to recovery and repair, I've also explained that, which relates to longer-term rehabilitation that will be factored into the normal budget process. So that is what we appeal should be done. Funding for this rehabilitation will also be done through the normal process. Move. South Africa has been a voluntary member of the Financial Action Task Force since 2003, which sets global standards to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Across national budgets, across national borders, in 2021, FATF published its mutual evaluation report highlighting vulnerabilities in the country's anti-money laundering system. We have since made substantial progress to address these weaknesses. 2 laws have been enacted to address the technical deficiencies in the legislative framework, namely the General Laws Amendment Act of 2022, the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism and Related Activism Amendment Act. I must at this stage pause and thank the honorable members for the speed with which these pieces of legislation were processed. We thank all honorable members for the effort they've taken into that. Were it not for that speed, we probably be still struggling now in arguing our case in FATF. The laws address 15 of the 20 legislative deficiencies identified by FATF. The remaining 5 deficiencies will be addressed through regulation and practices that do not require legislation. We recognize the need to be more effective in implementing our laws, particularly in fighting organized and sophisticated crimes. Addressing the FATF issues is part of the broader fight against corruption, crime, state capture, and the deliberate weakening of the institutions of law and order in our country. The FATF plenary will make its decision later this week on whether or not to put South Africa under increased monitoring, otherwise known as grey listing. We should be prepared for that possibility. The 2023 budget increases allocation for all spheres of government to assist with urgent spending pressures. Relative to the 2022 budget, direct provincial allocations increased by 92.7 billion to 2.17 trillion over the medium term. The increase consists of 76.9 billion added to the provincial equitable share and 15.8 billion added to the direct conditional grants. Local government allocation will increase by a total of 14.3 billion, made up of 18.1 billion in local government equitable share and 6.2 billion in direct conditional grants. This takes the total direct allocation to local government to 522 billion rand over the same period. These allocations alleviate some of the financial pressures, particularly in health, education, and free basic service, where the cost of providing services are rising. Madam Speaker, our economy is facing significant risk. Uncertainty is on the rise. It requires us to be bold, to do bold things, to put the fear of failure aside and execute the difficult trade-offs needed to get from where we are now to where we want to be in the future. The measures in this budget reflect these realities and the need to act boldly. Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to the President and Deputy President for their support and the leadership. Thank you for the Deputy Minister of Finance and the National Treasury team led by the Acting Director General. My sincere thanks to the Commissioner of South African Revenue Services and the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank. Let me also thank my colleagues in the Ministers' Committee on Budget and the members of the Budget Council from the provinces who shared the load of tough decisions that have to be made. Similarly to the Parliamentary Committee of Finance and Appropriation, and I express my sincere appreciation. My gratitude also goes to Neil Bell from the Parliamentary Bills Office. He retires in May this year after 41 years of going the extra mile to support the passing and the tabling of the budget and other legislation in Parliament. Mr. Bell, we say a bells to you, and thousands of public servants who work behind the scenes to keep our country going. Let me thank each of you South Africans for the support. Sashe Yewani, we thank you. Nyazingba. Kumamchal. For the continued support under the difficult circumstances of managing the finances of this province. So, thank you very much. That is your budget, Madam Speaker.
Order, honorable members. I thank the Honorable Minister. The papers tabled by the Minister will be referred to the relevant committees. Order. Order, Minister and Chief Whip and the President. Order. I request members to stand and wait for the chair and the mace to leave the chamber. That concludes the business for the day, and the House is adjourned.
Hey, what's that?
This is Octafex. It's an app where you can learn trading. Octafex. Trading made clear.
And tabling of the Division of Revenue Bill. The second order, introductions of the second Adjustment Appropriation Bill 2022-2023 financial year. The third order of the day, introductions of the ESCOM Debt Relief Bill.
The Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency the Deputy President Mr. David Mabuza, Cabinet colleagues, members of the Executive Committee for Finance, the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, Deputy President of the governing party, Honorable Mashatile, and leaders of all political parties and fellow South Africans. I'm honored to table the following documents before this House. The 2023 Division of Revenue Bill, the 2023 Appropriation Bill, the estimate